Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Live Healthy Now. We have another fantastic conversation for you today with a brilliant guest, and it's a topic that I'm very passionate about. We're going to be talking about brain health. Now, we have spoken about brain health and dementia on a previous episode. We're going to come at it from a different angle today, but lots to share with you to help you know the importance of taking care of your brain, especially if you are a woman, and especially if you are already in that perimenopause or menopause stage of life. So I'd love to welcome Donna De Villiers to the podcast today. Donna is a dementia prevention consultant and she works with women, which she's going to share more about, to help with preventing dementia. So welcome, Donna.
Thank you so much for having me. What a lovely introduction.
Yeah, very welcome to be here. So I just want to kick off with a question that I ask all of our guests to find out a little bit more about you. What is your most impactful healthy habit in your toolkit?
Oh, crikey, now that's a question. I think it's got to be the hormone testing. So I help women to really balance their hormones and use that as sort of a baseline for their brain health. And I know that that might not always connect particularly well. People might not associate their hormones with their brain health. But I think the way that I do the testing with my clients has been a game changer, because when you go to your GP and you do a blood test, it takes a snapshot of that specific moment in time of what your hormones are doing. Whereas the testing that I get them to do takes it over the course of a day at a set time in your cycle, even if you don't have a cycle anymore. And it measures quite a lot more than what you would get from a blood test. And I think that gives a much better baseline of what's going on in your body and how your systems are working. So if I can get anybody to do hormone testing,
Mm.
even if you don't take a coaching program, test your hormones and figure out what's going on there, because there's usually a couple of bits that you can do just from the hormone tests that make a fundamental difference to your overall health.
And is this something that you use yourself and have, found out some interesting information and insights from?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think for me, let me just tell you a little bit about my periods. Like for me, when I was a teenager, I had awful periods. And I know that, most teenagers go through this. It's not something that's uncommon, but the way that it was dealt with, which I think is common for everybody, is just like, we're going to put you on the pill and that's going to help things. And, fast forward 11 years or something. And when I moved to the UK, they wouldn't prescribe me the pill anymore because they said I was a stroke risk. And I was like, well, I've been on these for 11 years. Like, how is that level of discrepancy going on there? So I wasn't allowed to be on the pill anymore, and I wasn't really super keen on any of the other methods of contraception, and I wasn't sure if they would help either. So I just went for the wing it approach and thought, all right, like if other people can do this, so can I. And I spent 15 years in a huge amount of pain, going through like every month losing a couple of days of my life to not being able to move particularly well and being attached to a hot water bottle and taking every painkiller I could possibly ingest. And actually hormone testing, being on the right supplements and balancing my hormones, I do not have that problem anymore. And just that alone makes such an impact on your daily living. If you can figure out how your periods work, how your hormones are functioning in your body, it means going forward into perimenopause and menopause is going to be a lot easier because I know where to go for answers.
Mm.
And I think that that's quite a big thing. Like, a lot of this isn't talked about,
Yeah.
and it's becoming a lot better now. But we're also seeing that, particularly with dementia, which is sort of my sweet spot, that menopause has a huge impact on brain health. And the way that we handle it, the way that we move into these transitional stages in our lives, needs to be dealt with so carefully and individually. There's no off the shelf, here you go, there's HRT, fill your boots, come back and tell me if it's worked, or, here's the pill, go forth, I don't want to see you in my office again. That's not a solution for people. You really have to understand how your estrogen is detoxing, where your levels of testosterone are living in your body, like what's actually going on. And once you have those things in place, using, natural supplements has made a massive difference for myself and for the clients that I've used this with.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, there's so much I could unpick there, and not even go into the topic of dementia. But I think that maybe leads us to starting off with chatting about the role of hormones in our brain health. And something I wanted to kind of say early in this conversation is, many of us know about taking care of our heart. We generally grow up knowing, oh, you have to have a strong heart, and you do cardio exercise and build good cardio health, and that's what it's all about. And then there's muscles, get muscles. But we're not really taught about our brain health. And obviously there are other things. As women, we're hearing more about the importance of, like, our bone health, and the health of our joints and ligaments as well, and basically every part of our body. But the brain is so important, and yet it's something that, apart from maybe when you're younger, hearing that you should do a bit of Sudoku to keep your brain active, or the likes, you're not really taught anything, are you? It's focused on that physical exercise and building cardio fitness to have a strong heart and reduce your chance of a heart attack. Whereas now, because of the rise that we are seeing in dementia, it is thankfully becoming more known, and being brought to the forefront, so that we can find out more. So yeah, just maybe to open up a little bit about hormonal, or the role of hormones with regard to our brain health, and why that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, like there's so many things there that we
Yeah.
could wax lyrical about for days. And I do think that, you're spot on. There's a lot put on the heart. There's a lot put on the gut. The gut's becoming very popular.
Yeah.
And, all of these things balance out. And what I like to talk to people about is that, you can't just focus on one system. You can't just focus on the brain and think that you're nailing all of your health goals. You can't just focus on the heart and think like, oh, there we go. We've done a brilliant job. You've really got to see how they all connect to each other. And that's where hormones in the brain are fundamentally important, because you have your HPA axis, which is your hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenals. So the brain triggers the hypothalamus. There's a whole bunch of hormones that happen, and it hits the pituitary gland, and then that triggers the adrenal glands. So all of these processes start in the brain, but then they trigger other functions. Our
Yeah.
periods, if you think about how, estrogen, progesterone, all of these things are triggered in the body, they start in the brain quite often. But you actually produce neurotransmitters in your gut. And this is where you've got to start seeing how all of these processes interlink. So it's not enough just to balance your hormones and think like, oh, I'm nailing life. There we go. I'm done. It's also, looking at, you're right, cardio is important, but doing too much cardio
Mm-hmm.
creates inflammation in the body. And I think that there's been this attitude to, you got to go into beast mode, you've got to push, you got to have the beach body, you've got to do the diet, you've got to do all these things. It's like, please stop, stop, listen to your body and love it a little bit. Because what I see for a lot of women, particularly the older that we get, the harder it is to shift weight. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason for that is hormones, 9 times out of 10. Because the queen bees of your hormones are your insulin resistance and cortisol. And if those two bad boys are not hanging out and being friendly, everything else is just going to be a little bit wobbly, not working particularly well. And insulin resistance is, when we get that tire around the middle, that becomes a little bit tricky to shift. And the attitude of society is like, well, exercise more, go and do more cardio, go and use yourself in a gym, go and swim, go and walk, go and do all these
Mm.
things. And exercise is fundamentally important, yes. But the diet culture and,
Yeah.
the beast mode culture has got to stop, because a lot of the times when you start to balance your hormones out, when you start to eat food that is actually going to nourish your body and start looking as food as medicine, rather than, that you've just got to ram something in your gut before you run out the house to do the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. We actually have to start working in connection with our body and actually being connected to our body. And that's where I also see quite a lot of clients are really struggling to connect with the body. And I hold my hand up, I have the same problem. And it's just because, we've done things along the way societally that has actually encouraged that disconnection. So does that
Yeah.
answer your question a little bit? I know I rambled there.
Yeah. And again, like my mind's in overdrive because there's so much, like everything is interconnected. And this is right at the heart of what I'm about in my business. My main one-to-one program is called Mind Body
Yes.
Collective because it's about helping people to know how intrinsically linked your mind and body are. And in my own backstory with my health, I separated those out. It was different. I was very logical. It was like, well, this is going on in my mind. This is something wrong in my brain. This is going on in my body. That is, a problem on its own. How do you fix them separately? And that has been the biggest learning for me, is that connection. And as you said, with the example of weight gain, which so many women struggle with, especially as they do come into that perimenopause phase of life, is that they go at that from a one or two pronged approach, either just diet, so restriction, eat less, count your calories, or maybe exercising alongside to burn more calories off, and you get obsessed with, I've just done a workout and I've apparently burned 450 calories. And, now I can eat
Yeah.
a Big Mac or whatever. That's fine. But they're not, as you say, connecting everything else to it, which is a part of the story. And I compare us to a car. In a car, everything has to work in harmony. If I'm driving from Newcastle to London, for example, I need the fuel, or I've got an electric car charged up. I need the water to wash the windscreen. I need the antifreeze, oil. If you've got an oil, you need your air conditioning, the air in the tyres. Yes, you could maybe get there or part there with the right fuel, but if everything else isn't there, your car's probably going to pack in at some point on the journey or soon after. So it's trying to think of us in that context of we're a machine and everything is interlinked. And as you said, hormones are those messengers that are delivering messages to every part of our body to tell it how to work. And if we're just focusing on one thing, like a goal of weight loss and food, then that's potentially, why women don't get the results they think they should be getting. It's like, and I hear this all of the time, you probably do, well, I hardly eat anything, I've cut right back and I'm not eating sugar. But then you look at the rest of their life and there's so many things that are holding that weight loss goal back. So yeah, it's just exactly what we're both about in terms of how we support other people, aren't we?
Yeah.
So with the brain health, like, why did you decide to focus on dementia and help women to become healthier, but through that lens? What was important to you about brain health and dementia specifically?
I think it was quite a journey. It wasn't something that I ever expected. I never expected to have a woman focused business. I was going to work across the board, and I'd been working in health and social care. Like I've worked in health and social care since about 2007, on and off in different roles.
Mm-hmm.
I've done lots of different things. And for me, like, I didn't experience dementia growing up. It wasn't something that was particularly common or something that you came across that often. And looking at the statistics, like, this is something that is a lot more prevalent this side of the world. And when I moved into health and social care, dementia was the most frightening thing for me. I didn't understand it, and it was scary. It's really, really hard on families, and especially when you're going in as, a professional to go and do a job, there's an expectation there that you have this fountain of knowledge that you can gift people. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, I don't know enough about this. I don't have enough tools and information. And I don't think anybody did at that point. Like,
Mm-hmm.
dementia has absolutely progressed in the way that we treat it, the way that we work with people, the understanding of it. So it has improved 10 times over. But when I started studying as a naturopathic health coach, I was looking at areas that I wanted to focus on, and it was cancer or dementia. And cancer for me, I had had quite a few personal losses and experiences that I found quite triggering. And I thought, I don't know if I want to work in this area. And I remember talking to a friend and they said, what are you most passionate about? And I was like, well, I do get really passionate about dementia because I remember that fear as a professional going in. And then if I think about the families that are dealing with that, and then fast forward a little bit further, I'm looking at my mum, and my mum was going through cognitive decline and won't really do anything with it or tackle
Mm.
it. And it's quite disheartening to have all of this knowledge and not be able to do the professional job that I can do for my mum because it's not something that she wants to look at or tackle. So it's been a little bit of like a multifaceted journey, and going into it, like I just got so passionate with the fact that there are changes that we can make in our daily life if we do them. It's not even about doing them early enough. Absolutely, if you can start in your 30s and 40s, good on you. You're going to have a much lower chance of going down that path. But even looking at somebody like my mum, she's 70 now. There's so much that she can do now at her age if she wanted. And I think that the more education we put out there, the more things that we can do. And I would love for my mom to have a very different journey, but I also have to respect her wishes and what she wants to do. So
Mm.
it's been a little bit of a personal journey as well as a professional journey, but I'm immensely grateful for choosing this path because there really
Mm.
is so much that can be done. And the more I learn, the more I delve down that rabbit hole, the more nerdy I get about it. And I'm just like, oh,
Yeah.
I just have to tell people this stuff. So I
Yeah,
think it's really lit
definitely.
a fire in me.
Oh, and I love that. And when we'd first chatted, we're both quite geeky with all of the health stuff and knowing, the research that is starting to come out and what they're starting to find and understand. And I think something you've touched on there with your mum and kind of her mindset, I guess, and understanding towards brain health and dementia is being or has been and probably still is part of the problem in that people think dementia is an inevitable part of aging. It's something that has to happen or is likely to happen because you're aging. But actually, the research now is starting to find that, or has found, it's not an inevitable part of aging, and it's not necessarily because we're aging. It's because of the choices we've made that have impacted this machine, our body, and how well it's worked for so many years to a point that then creates the cause of dementia, isn't it? And I think that's that shift. I know you very much want to be part of trying to help change so that people know you don't have to age and think aging is going to mean things like dementia or Alzheimer's or even heart disease or mobility issues. Is that they don't have to be something that happens just because the years are ticking over in your life. Is that
Yeah.
how you feel with it? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
Hmm.
spot on. And I think like I hear it quite often where people are just like, oh yeah, but they're getting old, they're in their 80s. And I'd be like, no,
Yeah.
no, no,
It's like,
that's
well, it
not
happens.
accurate.
Hmm.
And I,
Hmm.
and I do think like that's also part of the medical model, that
Hmm.
there is still this belief. I mean, it is shifting and changing. It depends on the consultants that are coming through, but there is this attitude that it's a natural part of aging. And
Hmm.
let's just put that caveat right there. It's not. This is not a
Yeah.
natural
It's
part of aging. These are lifestyle choices. Dementia is a lifestyle disease. And you
hmm.
can actually reduce 40 to 60% of dementias if you change your lifestyle.
Hmm.
And I think that that's a lot of the fear that comes through from families, because I've seen it with people that are supporting a parent. And the first thing that they think is like, oh, is this going to happen to me? And
Yeah.
it's the most natural question to ask. And actually, a lot of the time, we follow the same patterns that our parents did. We follow the similar lifestyle. There might be some changes, but unless you're really looking at how you're living, you do not have to age at such a sped up rate. And that's something that I've seen here in particular in this country, is that people are aging prematurely, and I don't even think that they're aware of it, because
Yeah.
it's just been something that's been accepted for so long. And then everybody looks at
Hmm.
these beautiful videos of like an 18-year-old woman still doing gymnastics or dancing and having mobility and doing all of these things. It's like that could very easily be you
I
if you look
know.
after this beautiful machine that you were gifted
Yeah.
with.
And have you looked into much of the work that has been done in the blue zones? It's done, I can't remember his
Yeah,
surname. Yeah. And that's really fascinating, isn't it? How in certain areas of the world, people are, as you said, the 80, the 90, they still work, gather food, are very much an integral part of the community. They walk every day. Their cognitive function is very good. That we don't see not just dementia, but also heart disease and most cancers just aren't a part of those areas of the world and those communities, which I love all of that work and the studies into it, because there's so many different things that it's shown up, hasn't it, about, you know, like you say, the diseases and illnesses that we see in our modern society, and especially in westernized cultures, are because of our lifestyle. So, with dementia, I'm sure one of the stats that I've used is, less than 1% of dementia is a cause of pure genetics. Now, there
yeah.
are other genetic markers that can mean you're at a greater risk, but then those risks, it's like a perfect storm. They're combined with other impacts, all of which are lifestyle related. And today we wanted to talk a bit more specifically about, women and why women are at a greater risk. And just to share, if someone's new to hearing about dementia and the risk women are facing, dementia's been the biggest killer of women here in England and Wales since 2011. And I think the latest that I've got is 2022, twice the amount of women than men died from dementia in the UK. And that's really scary, isn't it? And there's so many stats there about the forecasted growth of dementia. And I think they're saying, the amount of adults living with dementia is going to, I think, quadruple in quite a short
Yeah.
space of time. So it's a very real risk, and it is a very real risk for women. So what, I know, again, this is still not concrete as to why women are facing a greater risk than men right now for dementia, but what do you talk about when you speak to women about why they're at a greater risk?
So I think one thing that has shown up quite heavily in research is that we know that estrogen is a neuroprotective factor. So it has a protective element in your brain. And when we hit menopause, it drops off by about 30%, which is actually quite a big percentage. We don't want to lose 30% of our brain's protective factor. And then if we look at what happens with our hormones further down the line, is that insulin resistance becomes much more tricky.
Mm.
And when you combine insulin resistance with reduced neuroprotective factors, women societally are also living with a lot more stress. Like I call it catastrophic stress, because there's
Yeah.
just so much going on. And it's not to exclude men. I know men absolutely do go through this as well. But men's hormones are a bit more steady eddy. They're a bit more the same every single day. So the impact is slightly different. But when we look at the combination of what we deal with societally, what we're looking at with just the colossal amount of sugar that we're eating, how it's damaging insulin resistance, then add in stress to that. So you've got your cortisol from stress, your insulin resistance, plus losing the neuroprotective factors. And then where do you have the time to eat well, to exercise, to balance your family? A lot of the women that I see are sort of stuck in the sandwich generation, where they've got a younger family that they're supporting and looking after, but then they're also having to do a little bit more with aging parents, and that also adds to the mix. So it's a bit of a multifaceted thing that starts to happen, particularly for women. And you're spot on. Only
Mm.
1% of dementia is, looking at the hereditary side. And the way that I explain it to people is that, genetics loads the gun, but the environment you live in pulls the trigger. So
Yeah.
even if you have these markers, even if you have things going on, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to be the path you go down. It's
Mm-hmm.
really about finding ways to help women work as best with the life that they have and the lifestyle that they have, and just start tweaking things, start changing one thing at a time. Sleep is so important. And I find that so many women do not prioritize sleep because there's so many other things going on. There's family life, there's work life, there's all of these other things. but it's trying to bring back that awareness that actually you can't give from an empty cup. A lot of the work that I do is around self-care, around releasing trauma, and around starting to love yourself, because that is sort of the core. You can have the sexiest diet in the world. You can sleep like a boss. But if you wake up every morning and hate what you see in the mirror and reaffirm that narrative over and over and over again, it does a lot more damage than what people actually recognize. And I think starting to look at like neurosomatic intelligence and somatic therapies and really starting to focus on that as well, you've got to approach it from so many different angles. So I think that women have a lot going on. That's what I've noticed. And because there's so much going on, you've got to kind of have a multifaceted approach to finding ways to help them. Does that answer the question a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. And you and I are very aligned on that, which we know about, there's so much, as I said, that mind-body connection, but the mindset, that's one of my 5 pillars. And I always say, I'm going to share something with you that is probably the least commonly known thing about improving your health: the way you speak to yourself. Because like you say, you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, oh my God, I look so old today. I've got these big bags under my eyes. I've got grey hair. I'm getting old. I'm fat. Oh, why don't I look like whoever, Elle Macpherson or someone, and then that spirals into, oh my God, I'm useless at this, and I go to work and I look a right mess, and it's not just about the way you look, it's then everything, even in terms of your performance and capability at work, and how good a parent you are, and how good a daughter or sister or wife, whatever it might be, that just spirals. And so the way you support yourself with acceptance around who you are and your own value is so important. And that's a big part of the work I do as well, because that links to you embedding those other healthy habits into your life and your identity. So the things like eating well, sleeping better, managing stress, moving your body, and exercising, and so on. So I'd love to dive into some of those lifestyle related factors. And I know, that as you said, there's 40 to 60% of your risk of dementia can be reduced through how you live and how well you take care of your mind and body. So what are those top ones that you see with women? And I know what they are, but I'm going to ask you, like, what are the biggies that we do struggle with?
So I think the first thing to let go of is sugar. Walk away from sugar wherever you possibly can. I know it's not easy, and this is said with absolute love for anybody who has the struggle, because I do as well. I love chocolate, and it's the first thing that is my 100% go-to whenever I'm feeling a bit stressed. So it's not an easy thing. I don't say it glibly, but I think letting go of sugar has got to be the number one thing that we need to look at, because that has a huge impact on the brain. Massive. And sugar is inflammatory. And anywhere that inflammation lives in the body, that's where disease thrives. So if we can eliminate that, spot on. I think the next
Donna,
thing,
can I ask on that, just to help people, when you say sugar, are you talking about, real sugar? So we're not talking about sugars in fruits here. This is ultra processed foods, essentially, isn't it? It's things that,
absolutely.
or things like, even if you bake at home and you're adding sugar, it's those real sugars that you're putting in to minimize those as much as possible. Yeah.
And even to find the balance, like, thank you for asking that, because I also sort of forget that I forget what I mean sometimes, and be like, just forget sugar, and people are like, but can I eat fruit? Be like, you can, but it's also figuring out how much fruit you're eating, because I've come across some people that will have like a massive bowl of berries for breakfast. And they'll be like, berries are great, really great antioxidants, you go for it. But then they'll also eat like a snack of bananas and a couple of oranges, and then they'll eat some apples further down the line. It's like, you can also overdo it on the fruit. And then they might juice, and then they might have smoothies on top of it. So you've also got to balance out how much that is, because the long, the short, and the ugly is that sugar is sugar. Whether it comes from a highly processed, refined product, or from maple syrup or honey, or dates and prunes and anything else that you're putting in, it still has the same hormonal impact. So it's finding a way to balance it. And what I do for myself and what I do for my clients is that, I like sugar. I have a sweet tooth. So what I try to do is I have a satiating meal, which is a meal that's going to make you feel satisfied. You don't have to be like so full that it's still sitting in your throat, but just a really nice, satisfying meal. And then if you want to have something sweet afterwards, have it quite close to your meal. Have a little bit of
Yeah.
dark chocolate. You know, don't go for the sticky toffee pudding and all the ice cream and the caramel sauce on top. You know, that's
That's my
just
favorite. But only now and again if I'm out in a restaurant.
yeah. But that's the thing. It's that moderation. Like I don't ever tell
Yeah.
people to stop eating everything. It's just like if you can reduce it, if you can stop sugar to the best of your abilities, you're never going to get rid of all of it. And then it's also looking at things like crisps. A lot of people don't associate crisps with sugar. A lot of people don't associate alcohol with sugar.
I was just going to say wine is a biggie, isn't it?
Wine is a huge one.
Exactly.
And you know, like I try not to drink at all in most situations, but every now and again I'll have a glass of wine or a gin and tonic, but it's every now and again because alcohol also strips your gut biome. And that's something that I really want people to understand is that when you are out and about and you're drinking and you've had a great night, half of your hangover is that you have stripped your gut biome and it's desperately trying to recover. And that recovery, we all know what a hangover feels like. We all know that it's not fun. And to try and recover from that is quite challenging. And if you're doing that quite often, even if it's just 1 or 2 glasses of wine, it actually has quite a big impact. More so for women, I'm sorry, than it does for men.
Yeah.
But that's another key component of where sugar comes in. So it's just finding balance. Most of my clients still drink. Most of my clients still have chocolate. Most of them still eat crisps. It's also, we have to balance out where is the joy of food and life and socializing, because food is also a great way to sit down at a table with friends, with family, and be social. And that is also important. You know, that sometimes health doesn't necessarily mean that you live off kale and nuts. You know, you've also got to have the joy of the sticky toffee pudding.
Yeah.
You know, when you're out with family, when you're out with friends, to sit around a table and eat. You know, I was talking to somebody recently about culturally appropriate food. And so what if it's slathered in butter? If you're not doing it constantly, if you're not living that life every day, every hour, every minute, find joy. And sometimes joy floats around food and wine and socializing. And I think it's really important to have that balance. Not everything needs to be perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a big part of what I do for myself and try to help others with is knowing this so that you can then be intentional. And I've shared this when I've talked about still having a glass of wine, for example, or 2, is, you know, I'm choosing to do it and I'm choosing it from a place of being informed that I know it's got sugar in, I know what it's going to do, but I know that I'm doing it like through choice rather than just how a lot of people live, where it's, you know, it's habit and it's grabbing a packet of crisps and bar of chocolate because it's 3 o'clock every single day sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you're making a choice and going, well, what is the impact of this? And I think of it in terms of fuel. You know, what's that fuel? Again, not just to in terms of calories, but brain health, heart health, you know, gut health especially, and so on. Yeah. So sugar, I think, we've got that. Good tip.
And I think that's really beautiful how you frame that for people so that you can talk about intention around it as well. Like I really, really like that. That's a cracking way to help somebody
thank you.
work through that. But yeah, I think sugar is probably my top one. And then sleep is probably the next one. Like we need to get a minimum of 7 hours, maximum 9. I know there's quite a lot of people that will be like, go, 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 go. And then come the weekend, they just crash out and they'll sleep for 10 hours or 12 hours and then have really, really slow days. And the slow days are fantastic. But sleep hygiene, it's really important to have the same bedtime and the same wake up time. And if there are any young parents that are listening to this, like, and it's triggering, I do apologize, because I can imagine, you know, when you've got younger families, it is more challenging to find sleep, and naps are going to be your best friend. But that's sort of where your brain cleans itself out. It needs those moments to have a bit of a refresh. And when we're sleeping, that is the key component there. So if we can really prioritize sleep hygiene, that would be the best thing in the world. And there's great things that you can do. You can have, you know, a bath with lots of Epsom salts in it just before you go to bed. If you don't have a
Mm-hmm.
bath, soak your feet in some Epsom salts for 20 minutes before
Mm.
you go to bed. If you try and make yourself warm, have a shower, lather yourself in whatever,
Mm-hmm.
body butter, make yourself feel really cozy and lovely, get into bed, try not to touch your phone. I think
Yeah.
this is one of the big things. Leave your phone
Mm-hmm.
downstairs or in another room. Like, just stay away from a blue light for half an hour at the bare minimum, 2 hours if you can.
Mm.
And just leave your phone, leave your laptop, leave the TV, spend a little bit of time reading a book. And not on a Kindle, if you can read like a book, that would be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And just do something for your brain, because that's going to make a real big difference as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sleep's definitely my biggest health problem, and I think it's got slightly worse over the past year as I've become more perimenopausal, but I've struggled with sleep probably since I was pregnant, so 17 years ago. And
Thank you.
it didn't kind of get much better after I had my daughter, I think because I had a lot of anxiety and stress, and so yeah, I'm very aware of sleep and its impact, and it's probably for me the thing I do worry about that could be causing things in my future health, like, brain health problems, as we're talking about, or other things, because, yeah, there's so much research there now, isn't there, again, of what, it's kind of like, if you think of everything we do in the day as grit and dirt, and it's all, filling our mind, brain, and then at night, as you say, it's cleaning that out, it's processing it, storing what it needs to, removing what it doesn't need to, regenerating those cells that have been used, and so on. And I mean, it's a whole complex process, isn't it? But when that isn't happening, and then you're building up, it's like plaque, isn't it? And that's essentially the
Yeah.
same as what's happening with the reduction of estrogen, and why our our risk is greater as women, isn't it? Because it's allowing that build up of plaque, and dementia is that build up, isn't it? It's where it starts to form
Yeah.
and build up over time. So yeah, and I think what I would just say about young parents is, this is a season of your life right now, and so sleep might not be the area that you can focus on and get exactly how you want it to be. So what else can you do in other parts of your well-being and health to make that as good as it can be? Maybe it's exercise and eating, for example, and trying to take some downtime, even if you're struggling with the block of good sleep in a night. But yeah, some good tips there. Phone, definitely. I've stopped using my phone last thing at night and on a morning, probably a year or so plus, but I'm not the best at switching off the laptop probably early enough.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress, shall we say? But yeah, something, again, a lot of people, and I hear this came up actually in a workshop recently. By the time the kids get to bed and they've tidied up and so on, it's their time is then in front of the screen, whether it's scrolling through Instagram or Facebook, or watching Netflix on a giant TV in your room or bedroom even, and so that's what they see as their de-stress time and
Yeah.
self-care almost, but actually that's then playing out in a negative way when you try to get to sleep and you can't get to sleep and you can't stay asleep and you wake up too early.
And I think that that light is stimulating. I think that that's
Mm-hmm.
where the challenge is. And I hold my hand up for this. I'm addicted to my phone. Not so much TV, but my phone. I have a
Mm-hmm.
very toxic relationship with it. And I find it really difficult. Like, I can go into a scrolling hole very easily. Like, that algorithm, it knows me. And I think that, really forcing yourself and pushing yourself is quite difficult. Like, I love reading, but even then, I will
Mm-hmm.
choose Instagram and Facebook over reading, even though I absolutely love it. And there is like a mindset switch that is going to be, it's a
Mm-hmm.
challenge for all of us. Nothing is perfect. I'm certainly not a perfect human. I still have these
Mm-hmm.
struggles. My sleep is not sensational, but I'm working at it. And I think you're absolutely right. It's finding what works for you in those moments. And if sleep isn't something that you have the opportunity to prioritize right now, what else can you do? Like, let's
Mm-hmm.
look at ways to sort of combat that as best as possible. Because there's loads of things. Like I said, like,
Yeah.
I have clients that, just absolutely cannot walk away from sugar and chocolate in the way that I would love them to. So we find other ways to combat it. It's just understanding that everything has an impact. So how can
Hmm.
we alleviate that impact, even if it's not completely, just by a little bit?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's
So,
definitely a lot there.
so we've got sugar and sleep. Is there another one that you would put at the top of the list?
Oh, there's so many. I think looking at the emotional narrative and the trauma that we all live with, and I can speak of trauma on quite a varying scale.
Mm.
It goes across the board, but every day we accumulate stress in our bodies every day. And I think I certainly for myself, I didn't always understand that there were tools and methods to release that before I went to bed. And I think learning those for myself and offering them to clients, sometimes using somatic techniques over talking or trying to put in protocols. I obviously want people to eat very well and have a highly nutritious diet. I haven't even touched on, omegas and B vitamins and things like that. Those are crucial as well. But I do think that having a really solid routine and connecting with your body, if you don't have that first, it kind of negates some of the work that's going on from the nutrition and the exercise and all of the other sexiness that you can put in there. So I do really want people to prioritize healing and looking at self care and looking at how they can connect with their body every day. And even if it's just lying in bed and when you wake up, just lie there and think, how do I actually feel? Where do I feel it in my body? Is it in my belly? Am I a little bit nervous? Am I feeling a little bit anxious? Is it sitting in my heart? Like, oh, why is my foot twitching? Like I have an eyelid twitch at the moment because I know my magnesium's a bit low. And you actually start
Mm.
connecting with your body and starting to understand what it does. Because I think a lot of the time we are from here up focused. We're very much in our heads. We're trying to logic everything. We're trying to analyze everything, but finding that deeper connection with your body and actually grounding into it. So I try to get people to do somatic exercises every day. And that can be to bring energy into your body, and it can also be to get energy out of your body. And when you make a habit of doing those practices every day, you'd be surprised what happens. Like I do them every day. The first time I did them, I laughed uncontrollably, and then I cried a little bit and I'd be like, what is going on? Why is this happening? And it can be a bit of a weird experience when you first do it, but it's like, I think is it Better You? They have like a 30-day somatic program that people are getting quite attached to. I see that pop up
Oh,
quite a lot on my
right.
social feeds. Getting people attached to their body is going to be the most important thing that you can do
Mm. So
long
when you say
before.
somatics, just because a lot of people might not have heard that term, what do you mean by that?
So, somatics is about connecting with your body. Like, your body doesn't have the ability to lie. If we think about our mind, we tell ourselves stories, we can follow a narrative. And I say this with love in my heart because, oh, the narratives I have followed in my life. It's very easy to stay in the brain. So, somatics is very much about feeling the body because the body doesn't have
Hmm.
the ability to lie at all. And if you think about if you're playing poker, when you're playing poker, some people have a tell and they're looking for the
Yeah.
tell. And when that happens, that's the body not being able to lie. That's what somatics is all about. So it's
Mm.
about a deeper connection with the body and getting energy to flow within it. And that might sound a little bit woo woo, but the body has the ability to clear things, to heal things, to move things
Hmm.
and shift things. And that's what it's all about. So
Yeah.
when we're focusing on somatics, it's really about having a much deeper connection with, like you're saying, like with that engine, knowing exactly what's going on in those moments and having the tools to deal with things. So connecting with the body, that's what somatics is. I'm sure that there's a much sexier explanation for that, but somatics is basically connecting with the body.
Yeah. That's great. And did you say Better You
Yeah, I
is,
think Better You is one
yeah.
of the programs that I've seen.
Hmm.
There's also somebody on Instagram that I follow who is phenomenal. She's called the Workout Witch, and I think her handle is at Workout Witch. And she is incredible, and she talks a lot about the different exercises. And you can also look into something called TRE, which is trauma release exercises. And that's again just connecting to your body and releasing things. Makes your body
Mm.
tremble and shake, it's not a scary tremble and shake.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that you'll be like, oh, why is that happening? Why are my legs trembling? Why are my hands trembling?
Mm.
And it's more just a somatic experience where you can't put those logical thoughts on and be like, well, it's just a thing, it's just happening, and I'm connecting with my body and I'm feeling the feels.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I'll have to check that out. So just kind of before we wrap up, I wanted to touch briefly. I know this is another huge topic area, but just to talk about HRT and when we've touched on one of the risks or causes, if you like, of dementia being the reduction in estrogen for our brain, do you think and do you guide patients to look at HRT as a way to reduce their potential risk of dementia and other diseases?
So there's quite a lot of research in and around HRT. And from what I've seen with people, not everybody agrees. That your body might not agree with the HRT. It might not be that you agree with it, but your body might not love it. And this is where, for people, particularly going through menopause, I think HRT can be phenomenal for some people. And for others, it's just not going to work. So it's about finding other strategies. So that's where the hormone testing becomes really vital, because it's not just in replacing hormones, it's also your lifestyle that you need to look at. There's a lot of processes that happen with hormones. It's also about the detoxing of them, as well as which pathway they're following. So there's quite a few things to follow. And if HRT works for you, have at it. If it doesn't work for you, there are other options. And I think that it's trying to find what works for each individual. It's not so much an off the shelf process, or yes, let's go for this, or let's not go for this. There's also a difference between, I can't remember the term that they use, but you can have the synthetic hormones from HRT, but you can also have a different type of HRT, which is, I can't remember, it's bio
Body
something that they,
so the
body
body
identical.
identicals
Yeah,
is usually the transdermal, the gels or the patches, and then you can have bioidentical as well, which is more of what you would get on private, where it's very customized to
yeah,
you. Yeah, and I think that this does come up often when I chat to women who, whether rightly or wrongly, have been told they can't have HRT, often because of a previous cancer diagnosis, or still taking, cancer drugs, and that they're really worrying now that if they can't have HRT, that's putting them at a greater risk of things like dementia. So I think there's that fear because of what we're hearing about, the causes of our hormones in diseases such as dementia, that it is scary for those women who either can't or don't want to take HRT.
yeah. So I think hormone testing is really important when you hit menopause, because that's where you can really start to see if you don't want to go on HRT, if you don't want to go down that route at all. You don't have to. It's not something that you're obligated to do. There are other opportunities, and you can look at putting in a supplement protocol with a naturopathic nutritionist that's
Mm-hmm.
actually going to look at how you're living, how you're eating, and what you can do to promote that. Because there are foods that will help with estrogen production. There's foods that will help with progesterone production. And I do think that if we start looking at lifestyle changes, sometimes that's enough for people. Because I recently saw a study where in Japan, most women don't actually experience many menopausal symptoms. There's a lot of cultures in the world that don't experience the symptoms. They might go through
Yeah.
menopause, absolutely, but in terms of the symptoms they experience, it's quite reduced. And that's from living naturopathically and living quite a different lifestyle to what we do in the Western world.
Yeah.
So if you are going through menopause, if you are starting to worry about these things, and hearing these conversations and worrying, just know that there are additional opportunities. I come across quite a lot of people be
Yeah.
like, I'm not taking HRT, I'm not doing it, it's definitely not the path. Like, please don't tell me to do that. It's like, I will never tell you.
Yeah.
But let's test things. Let's start with the hormone test, and let's start looking at what we can put in place for you and what will work with you, because it's also got to be something that you're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. And I think that's important because we're in this kind of, you know, zone of HRT being spoke about so much, and I think there's so many positive things about it, but as you said, it's not necessarily for everyone because of whatever reason that might be, but it is definitely a whole person lifestyle approach to building strong health to protect your brain, your heart, your bones, your joints, every part of your body essentially. So just to wrap up then, Donna, 'cause it's been fantastic having you as a guest and diving into this really, really important subject and finding out lots more about hormones as well. If you want to share where people can connect with you, and I'll pop everything into the show notes as well.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been so wonderful being here. Just thank you so much for having me. And people can find me on LinkedIn. My name's Donna De Villiers. I'm a dementia prevention consultant. And I can send you the links. I don't know if you've got all of them. I also have a website. It's vivera.uk, where you can book a free consultation. And please come and speak to me. You can directly message me on LinkedIn. And I'm also on Instagram. My handle is @ViveraBrainHealth. So come and have a chat on there. And I'm the person that responds to you. It's not a bot. It's not a VA. It's me. So just drop me a message. And for anybody that comes through this podcast, just let me know where you've come from so that I can put you down as a free consultation.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, and definitely take Donna up on that, because, you know, this is something that maybe you haven't thought about through this lens, you know, and you're hearing this and thinking, actually, this is something I would like to explore more about. So, yeah, definitely take advantage. And if you have taken something away new from listening today, then let us know, because it's always good to know that we're not just speaking to thin air, you know, that we are helping people and that we've made a difference to someone out there. So thank you again, Donna. It's been fantastic chatting, and I really appreciate you sharing all of your knowledge and passion.
Thank you so much, Nicola. It's been a real treat.
You're welcome.